Hello guys, Panzermice36 here. Today we're going to be taking a look at this kit here, which is the Tamiya Italian Heavy Tank P40. This is going to be a post-build review video where I basically look at how this thing was to build after I've actually completed it. Basically an inbox review, but when it's actually put together, so I can talk about not only the detail of the kit, but also the assembly and the fit, the instructions, stuff like that. So while this is a Tamiya kit, this is also my first Italeri kit, because in actuality this is a reboxing of the Italeri kit of the same vehicle. Now, as far as I can tell, Tamiya didn't really retool the molds at all. They're still Italeri because there's a little bit of flash on some parts. The tracks are full of pin marks, and also they give you like a little reference guide inside there with some photos of the surviving vehicles, and those are just straight up Italeri, still the names on them and stuff like that. But the instructions, however, have been remade by Tamiya, so they're very, very good. So as usual, before we begin, I want to point out all the things I've done to the kit that are not standard. So those would include, most notably, the gun barrel. You can see this is actually black. That is because the kit two-piece halved gun barrel, which is two halves that go together, had a real nasty seam on it, and the end, the muzzle, was just terrible. Like, it wasn't even round. So I just actually cut it off. Like, this part back here is still part of the two halves, but I just sliced off the halves there. And this is actually a T-34 gun barrel, but it looks exactly the same, so don't tell anybody. I also have added this jerry can. This is I think it's Tamiya, maybe Dragon, I don't even know. It's a jerry can. I put it in one of the holders here. The holders come on the kit, but the jerry can does not. I've also added some styrene rod here to replace the top half of the antenna. So the bottom half is the kit part, and then from there up is my piece of styrene rod. And I also added a piece of, well actually this is a periscope from a Dragon kit, but I added a periscope here because there actually isn't one in the kit. They gave you the periscopes on top of the turret, right here and there, but they don't give you a periscope for there, you just have a big hole. So I just took a spare one from, I believe, a Stug 4, and I put it in there. But apart from those things, which are honestly pretty minor, just me upping the detail with the periscope and that, and adding the jerry can in, the rest of the kit, including all the photo etch you see and the tracks and everything, is what comes in the kit, which is actually very, very nice. Well, the tracks are actually pretty terrible, but the fact that they are not rubber band tracks is a little bit better in my point of view. Also, in the background here, I have the side skirts. I have not put them on yet because if I do so, it's going to be hard to take off the tracks to paint them separately. So the side skirts are over here. I guess another modification I did was I took off one of the sections in the back there just to make it look like it's been damaged a little bit. But that was pretty easy, just cut it off with a knife. So as usual with these videos, I start from the bottom and work my way up. So let's go with that. So the hull assembly in this kit was, it wasn't the typical hull tub you get. You actually have just flat plates, a bottom piece, front piece, side pieces, and you have to kind of fold them together to make the actual kind of box of the hull. Luckily they actually did fit together very, very well. So that was pretty good. I would have preferred a hull tub, but honestly it didn't misalign at all, so it's alright. Next up you get to the, after you do the blower hull, it's all pretty straightforward, but then you get to the bogies. Now, the bogies here are kind of a lot of work, let's say. So I've taken off one of the bogies here to show you a little bit better. So these are kind of like these weird, almost like, what do you call this, a HVSS or VVSS, like on a Sherman or something like that. It's kind of weird, but so you have two parts, like a front and a back. I've actually left the front piece off because this way I can actually remove the wheels to paint the rubber separately. And then you have the top part here, which is like the leaf springs. There's actually three parts. One part is this guy here with the little legs on it, and then the actual leaf springs are two halves that go together, so you end up with a nasty seam down the middle, which was huge. Luckily I managed to get rid of it by doing the old slather it with extra thin, but put huge clamps on it so it gets smushed together. Plastic melts and bulges out and fills in the gap, and then you just kind of scrape it back to, or I guess I use a file actually to kind of continue those edges and the leaf springs over it, which is kind of sloppy and brutal, but it worked, so it's alright. And you can't really see the top of them because once they're on there, the side skirts go down about that far. And I'll probably put a little bit of mud on the top, having fallen off the top of the track or something like that. Maybe some grass, I don't know. But honestly, you can barely even see the seam anymore, even though catching the light. So yeah, but the way that the leaf spring attaches is you only have the 4 legs of the top part, which is like this little guy here, because that glues onto the 2 leaf spring halves, and then only the legs actually come in contact with the top. So this entire top piece here is only held on by the 2 little legs glued onto there. Usually, of course, you would just do this and you would have 4 legs, but then you can't take the wheels off to paint them separately. So I don't want to break this off, so I'm trying to be careful. But yeah, it's a little bit finicky. That could have been done a little bit better, mostly if just that leaf spring part would have been one piece, and I would have had to spend so much time sanding it. But also they're not workable. Like the 2 kind of mini bogies within it, they are fixed because, as you saw, like this whole thing is one piece. So it doesn't work any more than just pivoting around the central axle. So it's not workable at all. But they do look cool. And the wheels, this is also kind of weird, but if you look, maybe you can see how let's get something to point with. Kind of like the central axle right here on the front piece doesn't even line up with the hole in the bogie, like it's too low. Or like the hole in the wheel. Like I have to kind of do something like that to make it line up properly. So when I actually glue this front piece on after having painted the wheels and everything, I'm going to make sure that this thing actually is all lined up properly, because otherwise the axle hole in the front piece there doesn't even look right. It's way too low compared to how the wheels are arranged. So after you survive the bogies, next up you have to put on like the sprocket here at the front, which is actually very, very good. It's got the nice letters or words cast into it. The idler wheel at the back is fine. It's not adjustable, I believe. Well, actually, I think it's a little bit adjustable, but not really, so not really worth it. The return rollers are fine. And then you get to the tracks, which are, well, I saw in the box, I'm like, ooh, it's a Tamiya kit, and it doesn't have rubber band tracks. This is great. They are so full of pin marks. You can see I just put putty all over them. And I was like, I basically put putty in like all the pin marks, sanded it, and just put putty on top again, and I'm like, that's it. We're going to put some mud on this thing, because there are huge sunken pin marks on basically every track link. So that kind of depends, because it's actually link and length track. So this whole section here along the bottom is one big straight piece, and then you have about like 20 individual links which wrap around there. And then you have like another big straight piece here, and then more individual links around the back. So the big straight pieces have like kind of like offset pin marks. Like every second link has like one on one side, one on the other side of the guide horn, and then the individual links have 2 on every single one. Also, the individual links don't even fit into the sprocket. You can see how they're kind of not even in all the way. Like you can see daylight sticking through there. They should be flush all the way up against there, first of all. And I only managed to get them that far in by just putting Tamiya extra thin all over the track guide horn holes, and then just kind of like jamming the tracks in there, because the holes in the tracks are too small compared to the size of the teeth on the sprocket. So I had to kind of fuse it in there. So usually, you have the track a separate piece from the wheels to paint it separately. The sprocket is a part of that now, so I can't take the sprocket off from the actual tracks. When I paint the whole track assembly, the whole sprocket's coming with it, because it's all part of it. On the rear hull area, you have a bunch of these little toolboxes, none of which are the same. There's like 4 boxes here, which are all different shapes. This thing, I believe, is some kind of fire extinguisher, maybe? I don't know. It had a huge seam line on it, so I had to scrape it off, and I lost a bunch of detail. It's alright. The boxes are fine, they fit pretty well, and the actual, kind of those wing nut looking things are separate pieces. They're a little bit overscale, I would assume, but they look alright. And you get 1 extra because you have 3 there and only 2 on this one, so if you break 1 like I did, you get an extra piece. You have the tool clamps, which are actually photo etched, which is kind of weird. Like this kit, there's flash and some of the parts don't fit very well, but then you get this beautiful photo etched tool clamps. It's like crazy. So you get the photo etch on the tool clamps, which you can probably kind of see in there. So you got like these 2 here, which have like the little thing sticking up. There's like a thing that goes on top of that, which looks like a track tool. So the track tool is terrible. I didn't even bother. So I just put the bracket mounting for it, and then didn't put the piece on. And then the actual ones here are for the shovel, which you can see across there. Now, I want to point out that when Tamiya remade the instructions, they didn't really bother to tell you that they actually give you photo etch tool clamps in the kit. So the track tool and the shovel have these terrible, massive plastic tool clamps molded onto them. But then if you want to use the photo etch, which is not even called out for, you have to slice all those tool clamps off the plastic parts because they're molded on. And then you have to kind of put these photo etch ones around them. Now that's not too terrible. Like on the shovel, it's pretty easy. Just clip it and sand it round. But on that track tool, the clamps are these intricate things, so I just didn't bother. That's why I only have the actual empty clamps for it right there and there. On the other side, there's basically the same thing as the shovel clamps, but for the axe. And you also have the photo etch for the, I guess, I don't know, the covers for the exhaust, which is actually pretty cool. And you can do a nice crappy job like I did on purpose to give them like that like heat deformed, bent up effect that you always see on exhausts. Here is the other side of the tank. And also, yeah, there's a gap in the tracks here. That's because I've left them off so I can take the little track thing off easier. Next up, photo etch stuff. There's these things here which are kind of like jerry can holders. They unfold and then jerry can's supposed to pop inside them. They're one big photo etch piece which you have to kind of cut off the photo etch fret and then kind of fold it up into this position. It's actually very good. And the photo etch is not super thin. Like it's still pretty thin and in scale, but it's not so thin that you break it when you bend it. So I actually managed to make all these. I think I only snapped one once, and I just kind of glued it, so it's alright. But they're all pretty cool. And they're kind of workable. So on the other side, where I put one in, I just kind of didn't fold it up entirely, and I stuck it in there. But looking at photos, I don't think it actually looks like this. I think that this kind of like arm across piece should be along the bottom. At least on the Italian armored cars, that's how it looked. So I don't know if, like, it's the same thing, I just didn't fold it up. I just kind of folded it open up. Because it kind of like, it's like a box and it has like these zigzags because it kind of folds over itself. But if you just kind of make it the actual box shape, this is what you end up with. And on the hull front area, it's pretty straightforward. These not really lifting pins, but toe mounts there, they don't really fit super well, so I had to kind of do more of that extra thin everywhere and jam them in till they just kind of melt into place. But that's alright. The photo etch brackets here for the fenders are very nice. They're nice and in scale, which is very good. And the headlights here are a little bit flashy. And once again, when Tamiya remade the instructions, they forgot to tell you that Italeri gives you clear parts which can go in there. Tamiya doesn't really say anything about that. They just show you put these parts on and then they're like, yep. But there's actually clear parts in the kit hidden away somewhere that simulate the headlight lenses, so you can actually put those on afterwards after you painted it. And like I already mentioned, I used a spare viewport here for the driver, and the hatch here I actually managed to pose open because it has actual workable like arms and stuff inside there, if you can see a little bit, so you can pose it open if you want. Back over here to the engine deck. This is actually a couple pieces, but I managed to glue them together to leave them separate, which is good because I need to paint in here because these louvers are absolutely huge and there's nothing inside and you can definitely see in through there. So I'm going to have to paint the entire area here black, so when you look in through these you can't really see much. Also, the looking at the photos in the reference guide they give you, this is not accurate. Like you see there's a big step from, if I can get the angle, you can see like this is low and then it steps up a big amount to the top of this vent right there. It's actually flush on the photos and instruction, or like the little guide they give you. And like there's like gaps and stuff, and this really should be like one piece. Because you can see the seam line here, I guess, is the edge of that panel. And in reality, this section, this half over here, is actually part of the vents here, and then the other half is a separate piece. But in the kit, they actually cut the piece right at the end of the vents there, so you end up with gaps and stuff and doesn't line up properly, and it's not actually accurate. Once again, I just couldn't really be bothered by this point. I'm just trying to put this thing together. This was supposed to be like an, oh, let's build a nice easy Tamiya kit between my insane dragon and trumpeter builds. Something nice and easy. This wasn't as easy as I hoped, and I just wasn't really caring too much about the finer details on it because I just wanted to have a little bit more of a stress-free build as much as I could get with something like this. So on the upper superstructure area here, everything actually went together pretty nicely. The fit was pretty good here. Honestly, it wasn't that bad. Maybe a little bit loose along kind of where the front panel meets there. It was a little bit kind of sketchy, but like actually fitting the panels, the bolted on panels onto this, everything fit pretty well. So that was pretty good. Now with the turret, it was a little bit different. So the turret sprue parts, it kind of warped a little bit in there. And also, much like the hull, this isn't like a a pre-made slide molded thing. It's a bunch of individual flat panels you assemble into the turret. So I kind of put the side pieces on to the bottom of the turret, and then I glued the top of the turret in place, and I tried to put the back panel in, but the two sides were like open like 20 degrees. They're just like really splayed out because they were all warped up, so to kind of clamp them down to get them back into place to glue the rear hull panel into, or the rear turret panel into place. Everything here was kind of just warped. Not really warped as in like twisted, but just it was kind of like everything just kind of bent outwards instead of lining up properly. But you just kind of clamp it or hold it when the glue is drying, and you can get them to fit back into position pretty nicely. I didn't bother putting on the machine gun, which goes on that little thing up on the top here, because it looks god-awful. So I just went with the mount because they always had the mount. I guess it's part of the turret roof. The hatch here has very little detail on the inside, so I leave it closed. The handle for it is also pretty crappy, but it's just something. The turret periscopes here are also just little nubs. Like if you look closely on them, they're like just a little blob. It's kind of sad, but you know, whatever, it's fine. And then I also, another kind of like modification I did was I cut a little notch in like the panel right about there, because you know there's a gap here because that's two individual pieces of armor right there and there, but there wasn't any gap at the top, so I just kind of put the little cut right there, just further emphasize that that's a piece and that's a piece over there. So you know. Oh, and also these guys are kind of flashy, the holes there. Yeah, and you can probably see that like the fit isn't super perfect around like the top there and stuff. That's because, like I was saying before, the side panels were warped outwards, so I had to kind of just hold them in place while this rear piece glued in place. Yeah, kind of not okay, but I know I built worse. It came together in the end pretty well. Also, these individual bolts here, these big guys, are separate pieces, and the sprue attachment points are massive compared to how small those little individual bolts are. So it's kind of hard to sand off the point without destroying the piece. Even holding this thing while sanding off the attachment point is next to impossible. And like I mentioned previously, the gun barrel comes in halves, so you might be able to still see kind of like the remnants of where I had to sand it. But there is a seam line. This is two halves that go together, and it continued along down the front because it's two halves along the entire length. But you know, kind of around where the muzzle hole is, the fact that it's two halves is really apparent because there'd be like a huge gap, and it was more like an oval than a circle. So like I mentioned before, I cut off the barrel at this point, and this here on is a T34 barrel, which looks exactly the same. So if I didn't tell you that, you probably wouldn't have even noticed. Alright, so I probably sound like I'm being pretty critical, and I kind of am because the kit wasn't that great. But it wasn't terrible either. I built much worse things, like that Dragon Sherman that you probably saw before. This, as a Tamiya kit, it's bad. As an Italeri kit, I'm not too sure. It's my first one. Not super impressive, but it was doable. Like, most of it just kind of fit together well. It was alright. And parts like the photo etch that they give you is a great addition. It actually really brings up a little detail where you need it. But just things like the tracks and the poor fit around the turret kind of halves when I was trying to put them together, and the just complete inaccuracy with the engine deck area here kind of just saps the enjoyment out of it a little bit. So yeah, I wouldn't really recommend this, but I think it's the only kit of the P40 out there, so if you really want to build one, you don't really have much option. It's not going to be the best time ever, but it's doable. A little bit frustrating in some parts. The kit's like a 6 out of 10 basically, which is honestly being a little bit generous, but it is a cool subject, so it gets bonus points there. When I finish this thing up, I'm not sure how I'm going to paint it. These were only, the story of these is basically the Italians built them right when they were switching sides in World War II. So then the Germans are just kind of like, thanks for building them. We're going to take those, and the Germans use them with police units and anti-partisan units. I might build it as like a what if the Italians actually managed to field their own tank kind of thing, which would give me more interesting camouflage options. But we will see. I'm not sure when I paint this up. It might sit around a little while because I have a couple of things I want to get over with first. Anyways, thanks for watching very much. Hope you enjoyed the review. If you have any questions or comments about the kit or anything really, post them on below. I'll be happy to answer them. I will see you next time. Thanks for watching very much. Thanks for commenting. And of course, huge thanks to Patreon and PayPal supporters who give me a little bit of money every month, which helps me buying paints and products and kits and stuff like that for you guys to see in the videos for me to review and give my thoughts on. So like I said, thanks for watching. I will see you next time. Goodbye and happy modeling.